Welcome to Leadership Matters, a podcast hosted by me, Steve Parker. This is a series that brings a fresh perspective to leadership, motivation, and how to succeed by talking to a diverse range of CEOs, business managers, and world-class talent. We also offer some personal tips to help you in your career. Each episode aims to provide a snapshot into the life and philosophy of some of Taiwan's most successful leaders, and to help you find out why leadership matters. Welcome to the podcast today. We're talking to Mark Hsu. I'm very, very lucky to have Mark Hsu here. Mark is an entrepreneur. Mark has he started a number of companies over a number of years, and he's currently, as well as a number of other things, he's currently the CEO and founder of 11th Fleet, which is a company that gives kind of landing services for international companies and local companies wanting to go overseas and international companies coming into Taiwan. We're very, very lucky to have Mark with us today. Mark, hello.
Hi. Thank you for having me on your show.
Mark, one of the things when you do something like what you do is that people don't always understand what it is you do. When you have a kind of a big name company, people go, okay, I know what that company does. It's a product. When you do something like you, which is really offering services for other companies, it's harder to define. So maybe you can just give us a couple of things about what is the kind of the purpose behind 11th Fleet and why you started this company.
Okay. Thank you. One of the 11th Fleet, as you mentioned, in a nutshell, is helping, or we seek to help, foreign entrepreneurs or companies coming into Taiwan. Soft land, I guess is the terminology. And I'm primarily focused on, startups or technology-based companies. Whenever I got back to the Bay Area, I noticed the huge sort of demand for tech or digital talent. And it got me thinking, what Taiwan has is a lot of knowledge workers. They're great engineering schools. Taiwanese have a very strong work ethic. And if somehow we can kind of get some of these opportunities are in the Bay Area, but kind of do them here in Taiwan, I thought that would be like an interesting business. And so that's really how 11th Fleet came about.
What do you see as the difference between leading teams across the Atlantic?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is, I think, you've been here a long time, and I've also come back to Taiwan for 20 plus years now. I think it just, what gets me is, the Taiwanese workers, or especially, the technical workers, they're so smart. And yet, they're very, they're not as creative. And certainly, in general, they're very risk averse, right? So, and we're not talking about going out to even set up their own ventures, but just the fact that, in everyday kind of work, there's this kind of aversion to kind of making mistakes, right? And for me, it was also a huge adjustment, as well, because, although I was, grew up, ethnically Taiwanese, but I've been raised in the States. And then when I came back, it was reverse culture shock in a way, right? Like trying to kind of work with Taiwanese coworkers who had never been outside of Taiwan, right? And I think a lot of it traces back to education. One thing that I often anecdotally point out is in Silicon Valley, what we're really afraid of is like the MBA types, right? Like incredible with their pitch, they promise you the moon, but they can't deliver, right? But the flip side you see in Taiwan, especially within the startup community, is you have very strong technical co-founders or technical founders, but they can't pitch for the life of them, right? And they can't tell the story, right? Or they've already built a product, but they have no idea how to commercialize it, right? So I think the contrast is very stark.
How do you, I mean, it must be a completely different way of managing people like that, right? I mean, in Silicon Valley, you're saying you kind of let them go, right? Release them.
Right, yeah.
So what do you do? How do you bring out that creativity in Taiwan?
It's to be honest, it's very, very difficult, right? I think what I've done, personally is, um, what what I when I first got back, my Mandarin wasn't very good, right? And my written Mandarin is still not good, right? So what I did was I instituted an all English policy, even though all the staff was Taiwanese, and of course that was very very difficult, especially back then. You kind of the I think the level of English fluency has improved a lot, I think, in the last 10-15 years. But when I first got back, this was like the mid 90s, late 90s. So what I did was I actually paid for the English training, and I felt that I think for me that somewhat helps, because I think one was, some people it kind of filter out the people that didn't want to learn, right? That didn't want to adapt, right? But number two, I think the fact that they underwent the English training, and sometimes I would share with them kind of links, things that were happening kind of outside of Taiwan, and I think it broadened their horizons a little bit, and then and I think just maybe leadership by example, like generally speaking, I think I'm a very positive person, in the sense that, I'm very optimistic and I encourage their input. Um, I often felt that I was pushing them more. They probably felt pressure, right? Because, they hadn't been in a situation, in their education, in their schooling, where, they were encouraged to actually speak their mind, or, to introduce thoughts, their original thoughts, right? So that's kind of what I have done, is kind of culturally, I think, compared to the average Taiwanese company, it's very very flat, and I kind of call it leadership by osmosis. Hopefully they can pick up on some of the things that I was brought up with, right? The values that I believe in.
I like this idea of leadership by osmosis. Every time I talk to somebody, I try to pick out a couple of kind of key concepts, and I think this
Mhm.
leadership by osmosis is a really nice one.
Uh-huh.
You brought out a couple of things just now. One
Uh-huh.
of them being this idea of education and training.
Mhm.
I think it's incredibly important that people have some kind of development plan, right? If you're
Mhm.
a leader, then you've got to be able to not just think about what you can get people to do, but where you
Mhm.
want them to be, right? This
Right.
is this kind of training process.
Mhm.
You also, as part of that, you talked about having English training, but
Mhm.
also your decision about which language to use in the office. And this is a
Mhm.
very interesting one.
Mhm.
I've read two studies recently where they talk about if you are for instance, if I am the native speaker of English, but I use Mandarin, then it puts the people around me in a superior position. And so
Mhm.
they will want to maybe help me, support me, or work with me because they are the native speakers.
Correct.
On the other side, if you use your native tongue to
Mhm.
communicate, English in my case, it
Mhm.
puts you in a position of power,
Mhm.
stronger.
Mhm.
Do you have a view on kind of which of these is the better way to go?
Well, I think, I mean, obviously I have my own biases. Yeah, I would lean towards English. And I hadn't, those are very interesting studies. I hadn't encountered them in the past. But the way I kind of explained it to my staff was just that, I don't know how long they'll be, with me or with my company. However, because we're a small, an SME, we can't beat the multinationals. However, I feel that what I could offer was just more scalability in their careers, right? The fact that, if they agree to the fact that we all use English, even if they found better opportunities, they have my blessings, right? For me, I feel that speaking good English or being able to be proficient, in a workplace in English, written, reading, or writing and reading, I think it's good training for young staff members, and it allows them, to advance in their careers. And I think for me, so far, I think that sort of thesis has been correct. And I think for the most part, by and large, I think, the people who have worked with me in the past have been, kind of, I believe they're grateful for being in this type of environment. To be honest, we can't outpay larger companies or multinationals, right? But I think we have a good balance. And I think the because it's a flat culture and because everyone's input is appreciated, um, you know, uh, I think the idea of that they have a choice, right? Like how actively they want to participate, or if they want to speak up or not. I think that is appreciated. And in fact, something that I'm very proud of is, we actually have very, very low turnover, right? And so I think to your point, I think absolutely. I think they, I think it's, it's like if you were to put yourself into someone else's shoes, right? It's very simple principles. I think if you do what is in the best interests of your colleagues, I think, it does pay dividends long run, right?
I mean, management and leadership is not just about managing in one direction, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
need to manage up, down, and sideways, right?
Yeah.
And this idea of, if everybody is doing what is best for the colleagues and people around them, then that's
Yep.
clearly going to get the best result.
Yeah. I mean, I can't argue with that. I mean, I think, like I grew up in a Christian family went to Bible school, Sunday school. And yeah, I mean, I think the principles to management are in my opinion, like I think if we keep it simple, right? Sure, there are certain things that you need to adapt to, right? But I think, I'll share with you like a recent experience. It just happened a couple of weeks ago. So, we're a small company. We have maybe collectively 15, 16 employees. And so we sat down, I think, um, and with our HR and sort of my COO, and then we discussed, like, okay, how do we get to the next level as a company, and how do we kind of make this our company a better workplace. And I think I thought long and hard about this, and I really kind of arrived at sort of a simple principle, right? So what I've realized is that there are lots of things going on in a person's life, right? And so work is one aspect of it. And I'm also realistic enough to realize that work itself cannot create happiness if you're not happy in other aspects of your life, right? So I think our principle, the one that kind of the mission that we wrote down was that I want our workplace to not be a cause for further stress, right? So if you're unhappy in life, unfortunately, work is, like coming to work is not going to resolve that. But I think, especially now because I have two young kids, I feel like, okay, like what why am I happy going to work? And I think I'm happy going to work just for a few reasons. One is I enjoy the people that I'm working with. I like what I'm doing. And I think most importantly is not causing any additional stress to me, right? And so that's what I also told my staff is I think what I want to define is a workplace where it's not stressful for them to do the work, right? Because there's so many other things happening in their lives that is a source of stress, right? So just a very simple principle that we're sort of shooting for.
This kind of ties into this idea of helping people to build this work-life balance, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And and then one thing, I mean, the way we sort of set up our compensation structure is I've made it very clear to our staff. We kind of work on 12 months base pay, and bonus is discretionary, right? And that is directly tied into the profitability of the company, right? And so don't get into like because in Taiwan there's always this comparison around Chinese New Year, like who's getting 13 months, 14 months at other companies. And I think for me is I've been I've made it very, very transparent. you have to be happy with your base. And then the other benefits is the fact that, we're very flexible. We can work from home. You don't need to call in sick or, kind of come up with reasons why you need to go see the doctor or anything like that, right? Yeah, and then I think, like a staff member came to me and said, well, she would still like to make more money. And I said, great. I can't promise you that we can, always increase our base salary, year after year. But, have you thought about, kind of doing a side hustle? And then, maybe you could work, you know, 90% time, right? So I'm okay with, my colleagues, kind of working on side hustles, right? I think it actually encourages them to be more entrepreneurial. And I think the side benefit is they also realize that it's very, very difficult to make money, right? So I think that they have a better appreciation of kind of the position that I'm in, right? Like, to cover the overhead and cover everyone's expenses, right?
This is really interesting that you even almost encourage your people to have side hustles.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
this idea of getting balance is really interesting because I think,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people compare portions of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll compare, well, I have to work late, or I have to work some weekends, or I have to work some time, or they'll say somebody else gets more money or whatever.
Right.
It's very easy for people to focus on a single aspect of what it is. I think what you're telling me is that as a leader, it's our job. We have to be able to tell the story, right? Of the
Right.
whole, we have to understand the whole company dynamic, the
Yeah.
story. Yes, if you worked for such and such a consulting company, you
Right.
would make more money,
Right.
but you would also be in the office until 1 o'clock every night.
That's correct. That's correct. And I think,
So,
yeah, I mean, I think honesty and transparency goes a long way. I think if we're kind of comparing, like, different sort of leadership, kind of, like thoughts or leadership styles, I think like, I've worked with some portfolio companies, right? And the kind of the Taiwanese thinking is, oh, the boss, right, like needs to project a strength, an image of strength. We cannot let the rank and file employees know that, financially maybe we're ailing a little bit or whatnot. And I don't know, somehow, like, especially in the context of a small company, I don't think, that that's the best way to go, right? Because, like, in a small company, there's no place to hide, right? Like, so I've often encouraged, actually, like the entrepreneurs I've backed, to take a more, kind of a transparent approach, for their employees. But I don't know. It's a lot of times it's the educational system, it's the, Confucian culture or whatnot. They feel that it needs to be hierarchical, right? Yeah.
so, I mean, if we had to kind of distill, you've talked a little bit about some different things today, but I just wanted to kind of go through the couple of things that we've talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
So you've talked about education and training being
Mm-hmm.
important, but recognizing that there are cultural differences, but looking at ways that you can bring out the differences between the best of each of those kind of different cultures.
Right.
You've talked about you as a leader wanting to bring positivity into the room. And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
super important thing, being the best version of yourself at all times.
Right.
You've talked about this idea of developing your staff for the future, whether that future be with you or with someone else, but nonetheless helping them to develop to become better people and better workers so that they
Mm-hmm.
can go on to their next position, either with you or in another company. And one of the last things that you've talked about is this, it's a combination of two things. Like, you don't have to always project strength. You can allow weakness to show if you really don't know. And underneath that is this willingness to kind of be, as you call it, this servant leader, which I think is a really, really nice term. Would that be fair to summarize what we've been talking about today?
Yeah, I think so. Like, you've done a great job summarizing the points. I mean, I think if there's one last thing that I'd like to add is, I think, in Taiwan is, I believe it's on, on the cusp of change, right? And part of it is because of the demographics of Taiwan, right? I mean, there's just less and less young people, and I feel like for the young people now in Taiwan, especially if you're a company that needs new blood and you want to attract, the youth of Taiwan, then I think Taiwanese companies will need to change, right? Because this millennial generation, or they have a very different value system from their parents, and so that we, at least from my point of view, I see a lot of tightness in the job market. I think in the past, it seemed like the boss, kind of worker relationships. Oh, you should be just grateful for a job. But I think if companies stick to that mindset, I don't think it's going to work going forward, just because there's so few young people now, right?
I think that's a really nice place for us to stop. That was a great last point. Leadership Matters is broadcast on the fourth Monday of every month live on ICRT. And it's also available on the ICRT website, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Leadership Matters by Stephen Parker. You can also check out my social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We'll see you next time.